The armored human tore Commander Krosk's scaly skull open with a single rifle shot, alien brains splattering over the cockpit. I still see it the way the red mist sprayed the controls. It was our first contact with humans, and I watched our leader die in one shot. I was there, just a young warrior, part of the invasion force minus 100 Soran soldiers descending on the tiny human mining colony on planet Kepler-47c. Our commander deemed the settlement an easy target, just 50 flimsy prefab shelters and a couple of hundred weak colonists. Through the transport's viewports, we could see it all unfold in the dusty basin below. A lone male human stood at the colony's border, no armor, just a rifle in his hands. Commander Krosk transmitted demands for the human's surrender over the transport's loudspeaker. The human male made an obscene gesture with his fist instead. Krosk snarled with rage. A staccato of plasma fire exploded toward the human from the transport's guns, faster than should be possible. The man rolled and dodged in a single fluid motion. He brought the rifle to his shoulder, sighted and squeezed the trigger, tearing Krosk's head open. The transport stopped. Soldiers murmured with shock, but before we could react, the colony erupted with muzzle flashes. Camouflaged humans rose from the rust-colored dirt, encircling our forces. They were dug into spider holes with guns aimed right at our cockpits. The trap was sprung. If we charged, the humans below would annihilate our exposed underbellies with missiles and mining charges. If we took to the skies, the nimble atmospheric fighters above would tear us apart. And if we landed to disembark on foot, every human rifleman would have a dozen scaly skulls to choose from. Our first contact with humans, and we found ourselves surrounded and outmatched by an inferior foe we had underestimated. By the time the last shots echoed off the basin walls, the red Kepler dirt was slick with purple Sauron blood. Negotiations were made, a truce was called, and our battered forces departed the planet, tails between our legs. I still relive it all each night, the way that human moved, the way that single shot tore through our commander's skull, that spray of brain across the cockpit glass. That's the story of why we Saurians never fight humans. Those hidden humans turned out to be the TFC's Elite Frontier Defense Force, or FDF for short. All hell broke loose as 50 of these FDF guys popped out of their camouflage spider holes, outfitted in sleek-powered exoskeletons and wielding advanced weapons that made our gear look like children's toys. The way they moved, it was inhuman, too fast, too precise. Our troops didn't stand a chance. I watched my fellow warriors get ripped apart by the FDF's Gauss rifles, their scaly hides no match for the hypersonic slugs. Explosive rounds from shoulder-mounted launchers tore through our ranks, painting the basin in shades of violet gore. We tried to regroup and form a defensive line, but that's when their leader made his move. Mark Foster, I later learned his name, charged our position like a man possessed, a pair of plasma blades crackling in his hands. I'd never seen a human move so fast. Foster danced through our lines, his blades slicing through armor, flesh, and bone like it was nothing. I barely managed to dodge one of his swings, the searing plasma singing my scales, but I wasn't quite fast enough. Foster's backswing caught me across the face, burning through my left eye. Half blind, I somehow rallied about 20 of my surviving comrades. We made a valiant push to try and flank the humans, to hit them from a side where their numbers were thinner. But the wily bastards had set up automated sentry turrets around the colony's perimeter. The moment we broke from cover, the turrets lit up, spewing a hailstorm of bullets that cut my remaining soldiers to bloody ribbons. It was a slaughter. We never stood a chance, not against their superior numbers, weapons, and tactics. I'm not too proud to admit when I'm beat. With a heavy heart, I ordered a full retreat. The pitiful few of us that remained broke ranks and sprinted for our landing craft, plasma rounds nipping at our heels. But Foster and his FDF hunters didn't let up. They chased us down like predators culling a herd, picking off my fleeing comrades one by one. By the time I reached the transport, only a handful of us were left. We lifted off and limped our way back to the fleet, our tails quite literally tucked between our legs. High Command was in a state of shock when they heard of our catastrophic defeat. This was meant to be a simple raid against a soft target, a show of force to keep the humans in line. Instead, we'd been handed our scaly asses by a group of soldiers we didn't even know existed. It was a harsh lesson, but one that needed learning. We had badly underestimated humanity and paid the price in blood. After our disastrous defeat on Kepler-47c, Sauron High Command was desperate for intel on our new human adversaries. They dispatched our best spies to infiltrate human space, to learn everything they could about Earth's factions and their military capabilities. It took months, but our operatives managed to piece together a picture of human civilization. We learned of the Terran Federation colonies, or TFC, who controlled the outer colonies like the one we'd failed to conquer. There was the United Earth Government, or UEG, which held sway over Earth and the inner colonies, and the Martian Republic, a smaller but still significant player in the solar system. But what really caught our attention was the revelation that these human factions had been warring with each other for centuries. Our spies reported back on the humans' advanced weapons tech, born from the crucible of endless conflict, powered armor, energy shields, railguns. The humans had developed tools of war that put our own to shame. It was a sobering realization, but one that High Command was determined to learn from. We had hoped to avoid further confrontations with the humans, at least until we could close the tech gap, but the universe had other plans. A few months after the Kepler-47c fiasco, one of our battlecruisers, the SPS Dominator, accidentally strayed into UEGG territory. It was supposed to be a routine patrol along the border, but a navigational error sent them straight into human space. The Dominator's captain, a grizzled veteran named Krax, realized their mistake too late. A human warship, the UEG Intrepid, had already locked onto their position. Krax tried to hail the Intrepid to explain their error and request safe passage, but the human captain, a hard-ass named Marcus Wu, wasn't having it. Soran vessel, this is Captain Wu of the UEG's Intrepid. You have illegally entered UEG space. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Krax bristled at the human's tone. He was a proud Soran warrior, not some hatchling to be scolded. Against his better judgment, he growled out a response. This is Captain Krax of the SPS Dominator. We will not submit to your demands, human. Any attempt to board us will be met with lethal force. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Wu's voice crackled over the comms, cold as ice. So be it. The Intrepid opened fire, a barrage of kinetic slugs hammering into the Dominator's hull. Krax barked orders to return fire, and the Dominator's energy weapons lanced out at the human ship. But to the Soran's horror, the Intrepid's advanced shields absorbed the blast like they were nothing. The human ship kept firing, each shot tearing through the Dominator's armor like it was made of paper. Consoles exploded, bulkheads crumpled, and Soran crewmen were sent flying by the impacts. Krax watched in growing despair as his ship was systematically torn apart around him. It was over in minutes. The Dominator was a smoking ruin, its weapons offline, engines dead. Krax slumped in his command chair, the bitter taste of defeat in his mouth. He knew he had only one option left. This is Captain Krax. We surrender. Krax could practically hear the smirk in Wu's voice as he responded. Wise choice, Captain. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The Intrepid pulled alongside the crippled Dominator, and UEG Marines in powered armor swarmed aboard. They secured the ship with ruthless efficiency, rounding up the surviving crew and confiscating their weapons. But as they combed through the Dominator's systems, the Marines found something they hadn't expected. The Saurians, it seemed, had some advanced tech of their own, cloaking devices, neural interfaces, quantum computers. The Dominator was a treasure trove of alien technology. It was a discovery that would change the course of human-Sauran relations forever. Captain Wu, to his credit, saw the opportunity for what it was. He approached Krax, who was being held under guard in the Dominator's brig. Captain Krax, it seems we have much to learn from each other. I propose a trade. Your people share your technological knowledge with us, and in exchange, we'll provide you with information on human history and culture, a mutual exchange of wisdom to foster greater understanding between our species. Krax considered the offer. It galled him to cooperate with the humans after the humiliation they'd just dealt him, but he was a pragmatist at heart. He knew that the Saurians needed to learn more about their new rivals if they hoped to compete. And if that meant swallowing his pride and accepting Wu's deal, so be it. Very well, Captain Wu. I accept your proposal on behalf of the Sauran people. That moment, as much as it pained me to admit, was a turning point. It marked the beginning of a new era of cautious diplomacy between our species, a slow dance of cooperation and competition. We had learned the hard way not to underestimate the humans, but perhaps we had also learned that there was wisdom in working with them too. But our fledgling alliance would soon face its greatest test. A rogue Sauran warlord, Orcs, refused to accept this new era of cooperation. He viewed the humans as weak, unworthy of our respect. In his arrogance, he sought to prove the superiority of Sauran might. Orcs gathered a fleet of 50 warships, crewed by warriors loyal to his twisted vision. Their target, the human colony on Proxima Centauri B. It was a peaceful settlement, home to thousands of civilians. They were defenseless against the onslaught that followed. The colony's orbital platforms, manned by a small TFC garrison, were the first to fall. Zarx's ships tore through their shields like claws through flesh, leaving the smoldering husks to drift in the void. Then came the ground assault. Drop pods rained from the sky, disgorging hordes of Zarx's fanatical troops. They swarmed through the colony streets, plasma rifles spitting death. Civilians ran, screaming, only to be cut down by indiscriminate fire. The stench of burned meat filled the air. The TFC garrison, hopelessly outnumbered, fought with the fury of cornered predators. I saw one human, a grizzled sergeant, take a plasma bolt to the gut and keep fighting, his rifle barking until his last breath. But courage alone couldn't stem the tide. The colony was drowning in blood. Then a miracle, a task force of UEEG and Martian ships dropped out of warp, weapons hot. At their head was a familiar face, Mark Foster, the man who'd given me my scar. He was a general now, leader of the joint Human-Soran peacekeepers. Foster hailed the Soran High Command, his voice a thunderclap over the comms. "Order your dog Zarx to stand down, or we will put him down to my shock," High Command agreed. They sent a transmission to Zarx, demanding his surrender, but the warlord just laughed, mad eyes glinting. "I am the true voice of the Soran people," he roared. "I will not bow to human scum." As Zarx's ships turned to engage the human fleet, Foster made his move. A dropship screamed from the UAG flagship's hangar bay, rocketing toward the colony's surface, toward Zarx's command post. It was a brutal firefight. Foster's men, TFC commandos in sleek power armor, crashed through the post's defenses in a hail of Gauss fire. Zarx's warriors fell in droves, but they sold their lives dearly. I saw one commando take a plasma blade to the neck, his head tumbling from his shoulders. Then Foster was there, a titan in scarred armor, wielding a power glaive that crackled with barely restrained energy. He carved a path to Zarx's inner sanctum, leaving a trail of Soran corpses in his wake. What happened next I'll never forget. Foster and Zarx, champions of their species, clashed in a whirlwind of blades and blood. Foster was a blur, his glaive humming as it sliced through air and scale. But Zarx was a master swordsman, his plasma saber weaving a deadly web. They traded blows for what felt like hours, neither giving ground. Foster's armor was rent, leaking hydraulic fluid. Zarx's scales were blackened, oozing ichor from a dozen wounds. But in the end, there could be only one victor. Foster feinted left, then spun, his glaive lashing out in a silver arc. It took Zarx's sword hand off at the wrist. The warlord howled, staring at the spurting stump in disbelief. Foster didn't hesitate. His backswing opened Zarx from neck to groin, spilling the traitor's entrails on the decking. As Zarx breathed his last, his forces laid down their arms. The battle was over, the colony was saved, but the cost was high. I watched as Foster knelt among the dead, human and Soran alike. The weight of command hung heavy on his shoulders. But there was steel in his eyes when he rose, a new resolve. This, he seemed to say, is why we must stand together, to prevent more days like this, more senseless slaughter. It was a lesson I took to heart. In the wake of Zarx's defeat, a new era of cooperation dawned between the Saurians and humans. High Command, seeing the wisdom in fostering this alliance, agreed to share our most prized technological secret, the cloaking device. The humans, in turn, granted us access to their quantum computing and AI research. Our scientists worked side by side, Soran and human minds combining to push the boundaries of what was possible. In labs across the galaxy, we developed new shield technologies, more powerful engines, and devastating weapons. For a time, it seemed that our united strength would usher in an age of peace and prosperity, but the universe had darker plans in store. They came from the void between stars, a massive fleet of ships that dwarfed anything we had ever seen. The Zorth Imperium, they called themselves a race of conquerors, hellbent on enslaving or exterminating all who stood in their path. At first, we thought we could weather the storm. Our new technologies, the fruits of human-Soran cooperation, were put to the test in the skies above a dozen worlds. Our ships clashed with the Zorth invaders. Cloaked Soran cruisers struck from the shadows, while human AI-controlled drones swarmed the enemy flanks. For a time, we held the line, but the Zorth kept coming, their numbers seemingly inexhaustible. For every ship we destroyed, 3 more took its place. They overwhelmed our defenses, bombarding our worlds from orbit. I watched helplessly as cities burned, millions of lives snuffed out in an instant. We fell back again and again, leaving a trail of broken ships and shattered worlds in our wake. The Zorth advance seemed unstoppable, but there was one man who refused to yield. Mark Foster, the hero of Kepler 47c, now an admiral in the joint human-Soran fleet. Foster devised a plan, a last, desperate gambit to turn the tide. He gathered every ship we had left, every soldier still able to fight. I was there on the bridge of his flagship, the UAG's Intrepid, as we made our final stand. The Zorth Armada loomed before us, a wall of metal and death that stretched across the stars. Foster didn't hesitate. He ordered the fleet to engage, to buy him time for what came next. As the battle raged around us, Foster input a set of coordinates into the Intrepid's navigation system, a collision course aimed directly at the heart of the Zorth fleet, their command ship. I looked at him, shock and understanding dawning in equal measure. He met my gaze, a sad smile on his lips. Sometimes, Xenos, the only way to win is to sacrifice. With those words, he sealed the Intrepid's fate. The ship plunged forward, engines straining as it accelerated towards the Zorth flagship. The enemy vessel tried to evade, but it was too late. The Intrepid slammed into its hull, a lance of fire and debris that pierced the ship's heart. The flagship exploded, a miniature sun birthing in the void. The shockwave rippled outwards, tearing through the Zorth ranks. Their fleet, suddenly leaderless, fell into disarray. It was the opening we needed. The human Soran forces surged forward, renewed determination fueling every shot and salvo. We drove the Zorth back, putting the fear of our united might into their blackened hearts. But even as we tasted victory, a bitter truth settled in our souls. Mark Foster, the man who had once been our greatest enemy, then our staunchest ally, was gone. He had given his life to save us all, Soran and human alike. In that moment, I understood the true cost of our hubris, of our petty rivalries and ancient grudges. Looking out over the gathered Soran warriors, I let the weight of that lesson settle on their shoulders. We had paid for our arrogance in blood, Soran and human blood, and we had only prevailed by standing together, by recognizing that our strength lay in unity, not division. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I like the story and I will heart every single one of them." It really helps me. Thank you for your time.